One of the big issues in a divorce, I imagine, is the issue of assets and splitting those assets and getting a fair settlement, whatever that might be. It can be very confusing, I imagine, whether you're going to take pensions, for example, or go for property or money or whatever it is. So how, Judith, do you think that sort of thing can be dealt with by the solicitor?
Well, in many cases, those assets do exist. There's property, there's capital maybe in savings, there's a pension. And I think the starting point has got to be really from the individual. What's your priority? I mean, just as a generalisation, the younger somebody is, you may well find that it's more important for them to maximise the capital or secure the property and not really worry quite so much about the pension, which might not be as big because they haven't been working that long and obviously isn't quite so relevant because they're not at that age. Whereas somebody in their kind of 50s and 60s, it's going to be much more important. So you've got to look at each one individually and find out what's most important to that client, what their greatest needs are, and then try and find the solution that fits their purposes.
And Tamara, do you think it's always obvious for an individual case which of those assets, if you like, they should try and get more of?
No, I think circumstances sometimes dictate. So for a young mother, for example, housing needs are going to be her absolute priority. And so in those cases, quite often, there will be more of a likelihood that she will take her share, whatever that may be, as equity in the house rather than as a pension share. But I think in the past there's been a huge tendency on women particularly to underestimate the value of the pension and to do a trade, particularly without the benefit of legal or accountancy advice, do a trade of the house against the pension, and sometimes that's a really bad trade for a wife to make. So we do help all parties, all clients, to make sure they know what all of these assets are worth before they start making those sort of decisions.
I think that's important actually, because many people don't really realise that their pension is often their biggest asset.
Yeah. And Kate, presumably another issue that's going to be tricky here is the fact that assets, particularly pensions, sometimes it's difficult to know what they're going to be worth in 20, 30 years' time.
I mean, it's important to remember that you're not always comparing like with like. Money that's tied up in a property isn't the same as cash that's in the bank, isn't the same as pension money, which you may not be able to get your hands on until you're in your 60s potentially. So I think the thing to remember is you shouldn't focus too much on each individual asset individually. You need to look at the overall picture, and the overall picture needs to be fair. And that's quite a difficult concept to get your head around if you don't have the benefit of someone who's got experience in looking at how particular assets may be offset against each other. It may be in a lot of cases that equalising the pension after a longish marriage is absolutely right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll equalise what happens to the property as well. So it's really, really important to think about the overall picture, not just each individual component.